You don't actually expect us to split this, do you? My sister-in-law said it with a laugh, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like the answer had always been me. The whole table turned. My mother-in-law raised her eyebrows just slightly, the way she did when she was waiting to see if I'd embarrass myself. My father-in-law kept cutting his steak. My husband looked down at his phone. No one said anything. They didn't have to. I reached for my card. I always did. I didn't come from money. That's the part nobody in that family ever understood. Or maybe they understood it perfectly, and that's exactly why they did what they did. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. My mom worked nights at a hospital call center. We clipped coupons on Sundays and called it deal hunting, so it felt like a game instead of a necessity. I put myself through college on loans and part-time work, graduated with a degree in accounting, and spent the next 6 years climbing until I had a salary that would have made my 20-year-old self cry in the parking lot. I was proud of that. I still am. When I met my husband at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, I thought I had finally found solid ground. He was warm, a little quiet, the kind of man who held doors open without thinking about it. His family was different from mine. Big Sunday dinners, a lake house in Michigan, a last name that meant something in their suburb. I didn't know what I was walking into. I thought I was joining a family. I was wrong. The first time it happened, we'd been dating about 4 months. We went to his parents' anniversary dinner at a steakhouse. Nice place, cloth napkins, the kind of menu where nothing has a price next to it. When the check came, his mother patted her purse and said, "Oh, I always forget my card when we come here, isn't that funny?" And then she looked at me with a smile that was almost warm. I paid. It was $312. My husband squeezed my knee under the table and said later, driving home, "That was really sweet of you." I didn't think much of it. People forget their wallets. It happens. Except it kept happening. His sister. I'll call her my sister-in-law because that's what she was. Even if she never acted like it, had a way of making requests that didn't sound like requests. She'd text me things like, "Hey, can you grab the cake for Mom's birthday? You're so much better at that stuff than I am." Or she'd say at the end of a family vacation, "Since you handled the rental car, it makes sense for the deposit to stay on your card, right?" And I'd agree because I didn't know how to say no without sounding difficult. I told myself I was being generous. That's what I called it. Generous. My husband had a word for it too. He called it just how his family is. He said it so many times it started to sound like a diagnosis. The thing about patterns is that they build slowly enough that you don't see them until you're deep inside one. By the time we'd been married 2 years, I was the unofficial family bank. His parents' furnace broke in February, and it was just a temporary loan of $4,800 that never came with a repayment date. His sister's daughter needed new dance gear, shoes, leotards, competition fees, and somehow I was the one who offered. I don't remember offering. I remember being in a Target checkout line while my sister-in-law held up a sparkly leotard and said, "These things are so expensive, I don't know how parents afford them," and looking at me. The birthday gift that stung the most wasn't the most expensive one. It was a cashmere sweater I bought my mother-in-law after spending 3 weeks looking for exactly the right color because she'd mentioned once that she'd been wanting something in dusty rose. $160, which wasn't nothing. She unwrapped it, held it up, and said, "Oh, this is the softer one, right? Not the real cashmere." And then she set it aside and moved to the next gift. My husband didn't say anything. I smiled and excused myself to refill my water. He found me in the kitchen. "She's picky," he said. "Don't take it personally." I nodded. I didn't tell him that I had stood in that store for 40 minutes, that the woman helping me had said it was beautiful, that I had imagined my mother-in-law's face when she opened it. I just rinsed my glass and went back to the table. That was the night I started keeping track. Not on paper at first, just in my head. A running count, the way you keep a grocery list in your mind when you don't have your phone. Furnace loan, $4,800. Anniversary dinner, $312. Anniversary Lowe's daughters dance competition fees over 8 months, somewhere around $900. Daughters dance competition fees over 8 months, somewhere around $900. 4th of July cookout supplies because you're so organized you should just handle the whole food order. $380. It added up faster than I expected. The month I made partner at my firm, I was 31, the youngest woman to do it in the company's history. We had dinner at my in-laws' house. I'd told my husband weeks before. He'd said he was proud of me and I believed him. But at dinner that night, when there was a natural pause in the conversation and I thought maybe someone would mention it, his mother pivoted to talking about his sister's new kitchen renovation. I sat at the table for 2 hours. No one said congratulations. Not once. I paid for the wine I brought. Nobody acknowledged that either. That drive home was the first time I let myself think the thought I'd been pushing away for 2 years. They don't see me. Not as a person. They see what I can do for them, and those are not the same thing. I didn't say it out loud. I just held it the way you hold something sharp, carefully, so it doesn't cut you. By our 3rd year of marriage, I had a spreadsheet. I'd started it one Sunday night after a family birthday party where I covered the restaurant bill for 11 people, $620 before tip, and my sister-in-law posted a group photo to Instagram with the caption, "Best family ever," and tagged everyone at the table except me. The spreadsheet had columns, date, event, amount, who benefited, whether it was ever acknowledged. I went back as far as I could remember. I added it all up 3 times because I kept thinking I'd made an error. I hadn't. The total was $61,400 over 3 years. I sat with that number for a long time. It didn't make me angry at first. It made me feel something closer to grief. Because that number represented every time I had believed that giving more would make them love me more. Every time I thought if I just showed up harder, paid more, gave better gifts, smiled through the dismissals, eventually they'd see me as one of them. They never did, and I finally had the evidence. I closed the laptop and lay next to my husband in the dark. He was already asleep. I listened to his breathing and thought, he knows, maybe not the number, but he knows what his family does, and he's never once stood between me and it. I decided that night that the next time it happened, I would not reach for my card. The occasion was his parents' 30th wedding anniversary, a dinner at a private dining room they'd reserved at an upscale restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, a prix-fixe menu, a pianist in the corner. My sister-in-law had been organizing it, which in practice meant she'd emailed me a link to the venue and asked if I could handle the deposit because her account was in a weird place right now. I handled the deposit, $500, non-refundable. 2 days before the dinner, she texted me, "Can you just put the whole thing on your card and we'll figure it out after? It's easier." I said sure. I was already figuring out what I was going to do. I spent the week before that dinner printing, not the spreadsheet, something more organized. I formatted everything cleanly, 1 page per year, a summary page at the front. I put it in a white envelope and sealed it. The night of the dinner, I wore a navy dress I'd bought for myself when I made partner, something I'd chosen for me, not for them. My husband thought I was quiet on the drive over. I was. The dinner was everything they wanted. A long table, candles, a 3-course meal. His father gave a toast that made his mother cry. His sister stood up and named everyone who had made the evening special. Their parents, their cousins, their childhood friends, her husband. She thanked the restaurant staff. She thanked the pianist. She did not say my name. I sat at the far end of the table and watched her smile, and I thought, last time? When dessert was cleared, the server brought the bill in a leather folio and set it at the center of the table. My sister-in-law reached for it, opened it, and let out a low whistle. "Okay," she said, looking down the table directly at me. "Looks like it's time for our favorite banker to do her thing." She laughed. My mother-in-law smiled into her champagne. My father-in-law chuckled. Someone's cousin said, "Oh, she's got it." Like I was a vending machine they'd already put money into. My husband looked at the table. I looked at her. "Actually," I said, "I think tonight's a good time to talk about what I've already covered." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, don't be weird about it." "I'm not being weird." I reached into my bag and took out the white envelope. I set it on the table. "I want to make sure everyone has accurate information." The table went quieter than I expected. It's funny how fast a room can shift when someone doesn't do the thing they always do. I slid the envelope toward my sister-in-law. Inside is an itemized record of every significant expense I've covered for this family over the past 3 years, organized by year with dates and amounts. The total on the front page is $61,400. My mother-in-law set down her glass. "Excuse me?" "Not including tonight's dinner," I said. "Or the non-refundable deposit I put down on this room." My sister-in-law had opened the envelope. She was flipping through the pages. Her face had changed. My father-in-law cleared his throat. "This is not the time or place." "I think it's exactly the right time," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced being steady for years. Every time I smiled through a dismissal, every time I refilled my own water glass, every time I drove home in silence. "Because you asked me to pay again, and I want you to understand what you're actually asking." I turned to my mother-in-law. "I bought you a sweater for your birthday last year. Cashmere. You said it wasn't the real thing." I turned to my sister-in-law. "I covered your daughter's dance competition fees for almost a year. You've never once said thank you. Not once." I looked at my father-in-law. "The furnace loan from February 2 years ago, I've never brought it up." "But it's on page 1. My husband said my name. I looked at him, really looked at him. "I know you love them," I said. "I've always known that, but you let this happen. Every time. And I needed you to say something once, and you never did." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I'm not going to make a scene," I said, because I wasn't. I wasn't crying, I wasn't shaking, I just wanted to be done. "I'm not going to yell or call anyone names, I'm going to leave because I've said what I needed to say." I picked up my clutch. "The dinner is covered. I put my card on file with the restaurant before I came tonight because that's apparently what I do. But this is the last time." I stood up. The chair scraped back on the hardwood floor. "Oh, so now you're making this a whole thing," my sister-in-law said. "No," I said. "I'm ending a thing. There is a difference." I looked at my husband one more time. "I'll be at home. Our home. But I need you to think tonight about what you're going to do because I can't keep being invisible in a room where I'm the only one paying for the table." Then I walked to the exit. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just walked out into the November air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing. A couple passed me holding hands. The valet looked at me and I shook my head. I'd taken a ride share so I could leave when I wanted. I ordered the car while standing there. It arrived in 4 minutes. I didn't cry on the way home. I put in one earbud, listened to a podcast about nothing important, watched the city lights blur past the window. By the time I got home, I was so tired it felt like I'd run a race. Not the bad kind of tired. The kind after you've done something that needed doing. I made chamomile tea. I sat on the kitchen floor, which sounds strange, but our kitchen floor is warm tile and sometimes that's where I end up when I need to think. I held the mug with both hands. My phone lit up. Missed calls from my husband. 4. A text from my mother-in-law, "You embarrassed this entire family tonight." A text from my sister-in-law, "Wow, dramatic much." I turned the phone face down and drank my tea. My husband came home around midnight. I heard him come in, heard him take off his shoes at the door. He sat down on the couch and didn't say anything for a long time. I came and sat in the armchair across from him. "I didn't know it was that much," he said finally. "Would it have mattered if you did?" He thought about it. He at least did that. He thought about it. "I don't know," he said. That honesty was the kindest thing he'd said to me in months. "I'm not leaving tonight," I told him, "but I need things to change. Real change. Not just you promising to talk to them and then not doing it. I need you to actually choose." He nodded. He looked exhausted and ashamed, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, just sadness. He was a good person who had spent his whole life learning to make himself small around his family and had never once noticed that he was doing the same thing to me. The next few weeks were the hardest kind of quiet. My sister-in-law sent one text asking me to just apologize so we can all move on, like I'd spilled wine at the table and not confronted 36 months of being treated like a corporate card with a name attached. I didn't respond. My mother-in-law called twice. Both times she said, in that particular tone she had, half wounded, half managing, that I'd humiliated them in front of family friends and that whatever grievances I had could have been handled privately. I thought about the sweater, the Instagram post, the furnace, the way she'd never, not once, included me in a family photo caption. I didn't call back. My husband started going to therapy. I didn't ask him to. He just told me one morning that he'd made an appointment and he thought he needed it. That was the first time in a long time I felt like he was actually in the room with me. But therapy takes time. Patterns built over 30 years don't unravel in a week. Some things between us had been stretched too thin, and when you stretch something too far, it doesn't always spring back. You have to decide whether to keep trying to hold it together or to set it down gently and let it rest. We tried for 4 months. We talked more than we had in 2 years. There were nights that felt almost hopeful, but I had changed in ways I couldn't undo, and some of the change meant I could finally see clearly what had always been true. I had been a guest in his family story, welcomed only for what I contributed, never allowed to belong. And he'd watched it happen, every time. The papers weren't dramatic. We signed them on a Wednesday morning, a quiet conference room, our lawyers in chairs on either side of us. He looked tired. I probably did too. Before we left, he said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I know that's too little now, but I needed you to hear it." I nodded. I believed him. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. I moved into my own apartment, smaller than our place, second floor of a building in a neighborhood I'd always liked, with a balcony where I put 3 plants that I somehow have kept alive. The first morning I woke up there, no one needed anything from me. I made coffee slowly. I sat on the balcony in a hoodie and watched the street below and felt something I didn't have a word for at first. It took me a few days to realize what it was. It was just me. My own quiet. The feeling of a space that was only mine. I still have the spreadsheet. I haven't deleted it, but I'm not carrying it around in my chest anymore either. It exists. What happened happened. I documented it not to destroy anyone, but because for a long time I had let myself believe I was imagining things, being too sensitive, reading too much into nothing. The numbers told me I wasn't imagining anything. They were just numbers. But they gave me back something I'd lost, the ability to trust what I knew. My sister-in-law sent one final text 3 months after the dinner. It said, "I've been thinking and I think you deserved an apology. I'm sorry things got so far." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more than I expected. I replied, "I appreciate that." And that was the end of it. I found a therapist of my own. A woman who specializes in women who've spent a long time tending to everyone else's emotional temperature. I told her in our first session that I wasn't sure what I needed, but I knew I'd spent years being very good at making myself useful, and it had cost me something I couldn't quite name yet. She said, "Let's figure out what that is." I went back to the firm and threw myself into work the way I had before I was married. Not as an escape, but because I genuinely love what I do. Numbers make sense to me. They don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what's actually there. I made decisions based on what was true, not what I hoped would be true. I started applying that principle to my personal life too. Spring came slowly. I started running again, something I'd stopped doing in the marriage because Sunday mornings had always been claimed by family brunches. I ran through the park near my apartment and listened to nothing, no podcast, no music, just wind and footsteps and the sound of the city waking up. I felt like myself in a way I hadn't in years. I don't know what the people at that dinner say about me now. Maybe they call me ungrateful. Maybe they say I was always difficult, always keeping score, always waiting to blow things up. Let them. They get to tell their version. I have mine, and mine comes with receipts, literally, and the knowledge that what I did that night wasn't drama. It was honesty. It was clarity. It was the moment I stopped making myself smaller to keep everyone else comfortable. Being the one who pays doesn't mean you're loved. It doesn't mean you're family. It doesn't even mean you're welcome. It just means you were available and you kept saying yes when you should have said enough. I said enough. And that is the most valuable thing I have ever spent. I used to think that being the person who always showed up, who always covered the bill, wrapped the gifts, handled the deposit, meant something, that there was some unspoken accounting happening on the other side, and eventually it would balance out. It didn't. That's the part nobody tells you about giving too much to the wrong people. The ledger only runs one direction, and you're the only one keeping it. What I know now is that the way things ended wasn't an accident. It was a result. Every decision I made to stay quiet, to pay again, to smile through the dismissal, was a seed. And so was the decision I finally made to stop. Cause and effect doesn't care about your intentions. It only tracks your actions. I acted like someone who could be taken for granted, so I was. The moment I acted differently, everything changed. Not because I finally got angry, but because I finally got honest. The hardest thing wasn't walking out of that restaurant. It was the years before it, the slow erosion of my own judgment. I knew something was wrong long before I admitted it. The numbers were always there. The silences were always there. My gut told me over and over that I was being treated as a resource rather than a person, but I kept overriding what I knew with what I hoped. That's not naivety. That's what happens when you stop trusting your own mind, getting that trust back. Learning to look at a situation clearly and call it what it is, not what you wish it were. That was the real work, not the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was just proof I finally believed myself. And then there's the question of doing the right thing when it costs you something. I didn't walk out of that dinner because it was easy. I did it because staying had become a betrayal of myself. There's a version of integrity that only shows up when no one's watching, when there's no applause coming, when the right choice is also the painful one. That's the version that matters. I could have kept going. I could have paid the bill, driven home, and told myself it wasn't that bad. Instead, I chose something harder, honesty in public, with consequences I couldn't fully predict. What I didn't expect was how much strength that would take and how much it would give back. Not the dramatic kind of strength, not the kind that looks like a scene. The quiet kind. The kind that keeps you steady when your hands should be shaking. The kind that lets you speak in a normal voice when everything in you is exhausted. I had been building that strength for years without knowing it. Every time I kept going, kept working, kept building a life that was mine and nobody else's. It turns out the same discipline that built my career was the thing that got me out of that room with my head up. I'm not the same person I was at that table. I don't think I'd want to be. She was generous and capable and deeply hopeful, and she deserved better than what she got. What I am now is someone who knows the difference between giving freely and giving out of fear. Someone who has learned, slowly, at real cost, that your sense of self is not a negotiating chip. You don't spend it to buy belonging. You protect it and you build from it, and eventually it becomes the most solid thing you own. That's worth more than $61,400. It's worth more than any dinner,